everyone, and welcome to Startup Magazine and the British Business Bank's webinar on finance and mentoring for startups. We are super excited to have teamed up with the British Business Bank to discuss everything finance with some of the leading mentors in the industry, as we also celebrate National Mentoring Day. Funding is always a tricky matter when it comes to starting a business, and the last year and a half has left startups with even more questions and needing a little bit more guidance when it comes to raising funds. So we are here to help today. This is what today is all about. So get ready with your questions, anything that you need help with, we are here to provide you with. So to start with, I'm really excited to bring you our keynote in the form of Liana Fricker, founder and Inspirer-in-Chief at the Inspiration Space. Liana is known as the Inspirer-in-Chief to colleagues and peers, and she has helped over 150 entrepreneurs transform their business dreams into realities. I've listened to her before, she's amazing, so we're in for a treat. We will then have a chance to ask Liana a few questions before we then move on to our lovely panelists, including Kevin Smith, founder and CEO of Boom & Partners, Customer Experience Director at Startup Loans, Gareth Price, and finally, Head of UK at PropTech One, King McMahon. So pop your questions into the chat box. I'm pointing, I hope it's the right direction. There's a chat box to your right. Pop your questions in there at any time, and at the end, I'll make sure to quiz the panelists and get those answered for you. But without further ado, please let me introduce you to the lovely Liana.
Hello. Thank you so much, Anna. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone who's dialing in online. So I want to ask you all, did you hear about the new social game that raised £1 million in pre-seed funding? The premise of the game is simple. Raise money to grow or scale your startup before the SEIS, the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme time, runs out. Oh, slight technical hitch. Choose your fighter. Like any good social game, you get to choose your fighter, status quo or overlooked. The default is set to status quo. A white, middle-class, red brick educated, able-bodied, and when asked, identifies as a man. Aged 34, the average age of most successful unicorn founders. This fighter isn't particularly special, even if he isn't a really nice bloke. You won't know it yet, but the game is rigged. Pick status quo and you'll jump through the levels and win the game in seconds. For a longer and more challenging game, scroll through the founders in the overlooked options. This is where you find women, minority backgrounds, a spectrum of sexualities, neurodiversity, and minority faiths. You can create an intersection of different traits. The choice is yours, but the obstacles won't be the same. The challenges are personalized to the founder you choose. Create an avatar that's overlooked, and round one puts you face to face with a local business advisor who patronizingly asks you, where's your 5-year business plan and 5-year revenue projections? Select status quo, and you start the game with a warm introduction to an investor who gleefully replies, you remind me of me. Of course it's too early for financial projections. Now, imagine the demo of the game cuts to 2 screens. On the left, Overlooked is wading their way through a plethora of requests asking them to do things for exposure. Next, they get penalized 2 minutes on the clock for failing the Affordable Childcare Challenge. On the right, status quo is jumping off from meeting to meeting. On level 3, they lose 2 minutes for shit posting on Twitter, but time is returned once status quo makes it to the good old boys networking night on level 4. The clock hits 0. Overlooked is still on level 2. The leaderboard says, hope you had fun playing. And status quo, they finish the game with ample time left. It's hard to imagine anyone would want to play, let alone invest in a game like this, yet thousands of people are playing it every day, trying to turn a great idea into entrepreneurial reality, but meeting insurmountable challenges along the way. Now, it goes without saying that the status quo don't always get investment and the overlooked don't always miss out, but the statistics are overwhelmingly awful. In 2020, only 2% of global funding went to women, the lowest since 2017. Men start with an average of 47% more capital when they start a business than their female counterparts, and are also more than twice as likely to scale up their businesses to achieve a turnover of more than $1 million. This is despite the fact that women are just as successful as men at sustaining a stable business over more than 3 years. What's more, government data shows that only 5.1% of UK SMEs are led by minority people, which is well below their share of the general population. A report from the British Business Bank concluded that female entrepreneurs from ethnic minority backgrounds experience the biggest disparities, which will come as a surprise to approximately 0% of founders in that category. The irony is that many bright minds are drawn to founding their own businesses because they're being overlooked and underpromoted in the workplace. But even the latest efforts to invest in SMEs are showing how little grasp the decision makers have on the complicated issues surrounding entrepreneurship and equality. Take, for example, the government's Help to Grow scheme. It's 90% funded by the government. It's a 12-week accredited course, and it's designed to help businesses to become more productive and or lead their digital transformation. Sounds great, right? The only catch is, to qualify, you have to employ between 5 and 249 people. Growing a business to the size where you can employ 1, let alone 5 people, is an indicator of a fair amount of capital, either through revenue or investment being injected into a business. Perhaps that's no problem if you breeze through high-profile early launchpad schemes and incubators, are supported by a rich partner or family, or have connections. But it's now time to decode entrepreneurship and lift the facade on what appears to be a preset game. When nobody gets left behind, everyone moves forward. Sure, not all ideals are created equal, but every entrepreneur deserves a fair shot at success. Too many startups created by overlooked founders fall through the cracks, and it's time to hack the code and change the game. And this is why I founded Inspiration Space. It's a place where entrepreneurs have access to community programs and mentorship. We're here to democratize entrepreneurship for the progress of all. And my personal mission is to help overlooked founders with big ideas and no network and little to no resources get from 0 to 1. So what can we do? First of all, we need more investment in grassroots networks like Inspiration Space. Early intervention is key. More needs to be done to prepare overlooked founders for the challenges ahead, so they don't end up exhausted before they even get going. We need to change the narrative about what an entrepreneur looks like. Gone are the days where success needs to pattern match with this. We need to encourage more diversity within banking and VC. And then finally, fund us. Overlooked founders are over-mentored and underfunded. There are an endless number of pitch competition grants offering less than $5,000 or Facebook ad credits. This is not enough to move the needle. Overlooked founders need access to a meaningful amount of capital that will help them progress forward. Wouldn't it be great if, regardless of your background, network, or resources, you could play the game of entrepreneurship knowing there's an equal chance at success when you choose you? if we're serious about wanting to progress in society and not just pay lip service, leveling the playing field isn't just common sense, it's game changing. Over to you, Anna.
I am here. Sorry, it was just taking a while to turn back on. Thank you so much, Liana. That was so insightful, and I love the slides. It's great to obviously see what you've done with Inspiration Space and how you've kind of inspired other people. I know from working with you and hearing people talk about how much you've done to help them, it's been incredible. I've just got one question for you, and before I look over and see if there has been any from the audience. But you know, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, and as someone that's helping others with their entrepreneurial journeys as well, it must all get really hard, and sometimes get a bit much. How do you push through and keep yourself going when times do get a bit tough and a bit difficult? What is one thing that really helps you kind of power through and encourage others?
I think the most important thing is community and vision. I think if you know where you want to go and you have people to help you along the way, you can overcome any obstacle. I think what's great is the ability to have conversations like this. I think that more people are starting to understand that the game is not equal for everyone, and that some of us are starting from behind 0 and others are starting at 1. Yeah. And I think for anyone who is starting a business, thinking about starting a business, or currently in there, find yourself a team of support, mentorship, so that you don't have to try and do this alone.
Yeah. And I guess that, having a community and, people around you, even if they aren't specifically mentoring you or helping you find funding or helping you with your marketing, just having those kind of peers and, I would say colleagues, but like sometimes when you're a solo founder, it can be quite lonely, can't it? So to have this community of other founders around you, you can kind of like cheer each other on and keep each other going in the tough times.
Yeah, I think the best support sometimes is peer support. It's people who are there with you. Even a mentor, once you've finished those early days and you've come out of the existence stage and the survival stage, and you've entered into the success and thriving stages of having a business, you can forget what it's like. And so that peer support is so important. And it's also really valuable when you think about how quickly technology is changing. When you can brainstorm with people who are also using the latest tools and trying to solve their challenges by bootstrapping, you will find that insight and that perspective that they have will help you go so much further than you thought.
Yeah, definitely.
I see we've got a question here about networks that are useful for startups.
Yeah.
Well, I would say Inspiration Space is one for folks who are looking at growing their businesses, starting their businesses. Own Trail is a fabulous community where you can post your own career history and also the help that you need. And it's a very active community of founders that is international. And also The Stack. I'm a member of The Stack, and that has been a really invaluable resource when it comes to things like trying to figure out fundraising and looking for capital.
Yes. Someone else has also posted, we are like minds out there. So there are plenty out there. But as Liana said, obviously the Inspiration Space is a good one. Perfect. So if we don't have any more questions for now, I am going to say thank you so much, Liana, for being our keynote. And it was such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. And for anyone who wants the slides, I will send those out if you weren't able to see them so that you can have a look.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I love the little characters, so they are definitely worth seeing if you did miss them. Perfect. Thank you again, Liana. And now I would like to welcome to your screens my lovely panel for today in Gareth, Kevin, and Kingma. If you can all join me on screen. Lovely. Thank you so much. So good to have you all here with us today. So today's chat is obviously a mix of kind of like mentorship and funding and how you can kind of help startups when they're looking for their funding. So I guess an easy question to start with, I obviously gave you guys a very brief intro, but if you'd like to just tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do to start with. So Kevin, I'll pass this over to you first.
Hi. Yeah, so I've been running a business consultancy since 1996. Boom and Partners mentors businesses itself. I, as an individual, am a mentor for NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator. I'm also a mentor and guest lecturer at what was Cass Business School, now Bailey Business School in the City of London. And I'm also a mentor for Prince's Trust. So one way or another, I get to see a lot of very different people and businesses. And I would just pick up on what Liana's just said. One of the really good things is about community and people sharing ideas and understanding that you're not alone and everybody's going through the same sort of problems as you are. So yeah, Boom and Partners works with everybody from early stage businesses through to scaling businesses. So that's me and us.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Gareth, I'm passing the mic to you now.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Gareth Price. As Anna says, I'm the customer experience director at Startup Loans, which is actually a part of the British Business Bank. We've helped over 80,000 customers to get access to finance and also mentoring through the Startup Loan scheme. I've worked in finance with business owners now for the past 12 years. I've worked with startups through to businesses scaling up. And day to day at Startup Loans, I look after the sort of customer support functions, so the mentoring aspect of the business, the website, and some of the learning resources that we now provide as well. And that's me.
Amazing. Thank you, Gareth. And finally, last but certainly not least, Kingma, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So as Anna said, my name's Kingma. I'm usually based in London. I work as a VC for PropTech One, which is a German headquartered venture capital firm, which invests into mostly seed and Series A European companies impacting the real estate and /or construction industries, so PropTech for short. I'm a head of UK, so I look at most of our UK potential investments and deal flow activities. So I've worked in VC for about 3 years, and prior to VC, I worked in a few startups, mostly as a product manager. I was very lucky to have worked into, let's say, highly successful startups, successful in scaling and also in raising capital, including Bought by Many, which has raised over £400 million since starting up, and I believe is probably the largest insurtech company now in UK. And I've also founded my own company as well. And I got into VC very much because I was really curious about how to actually raise funding. And I thought it's probably best to learn from joining this side of the table. So yeah, really happy to connect today.
Amazing. Thank you, Kingma. I guess, yeah, like you say, it's probably the best way to become a good startup is to start at the bottom and go through it yourself. And I think in the industry, that's definitely something we see a lot of, and people who have been entrepreneur and then turn something else. So I guess maybe that'd be the case for mentors as well. It's being a mentor is probably not something that you wake up one day and think, oh, I'm going to be a mentor and I'm going to help people. It's something that you kind of evolve as you kind of work in the industry and work with startups, work with funding. So we all know, like, as a startup, what to look for in mentors. That's, been covered quite a lot, but I want to flip the question a little bit and ask, like, what sort of skills do you need to become a mentor, specifically obviously in funding, because that's the conversation that we're angling it towards today. So Gareth, if I can start with you on this one.
From what I've seen, when it works well with our mentors, I think it's someone who's got a good head for for business, has that business acumen and a good head for numbers, but can translate that into a language that helps someone who may be passionate and may have a cracking business idea, but maybe lacking some of those core sort of initial business planning, cash flow forecasting skills. So it's someone who's very adaptable, and usually someone who's a good listener is able to help the business owner unlock thinking they may not know that they had, so unlock ideas that they may not know they had. And I think that's that's when it really works well, is almost that kind of, it's more of a listening role, and a coaching and a gentle kind of persuasion role than a more direct sort of hands-on sort of position.
Yeah, definitely. I think being a good listener is something that I've picked up on in the past that makes a really good mentor. A lot of people have said, like you said, unlocking thoughts that they did have, but they didn't necessarily know. It's sometimes not teaching an entrepreneur something new, but just kind of like digging deep and like opening up doors that they didn't know of the ideas that they had, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's certain qualities that obviously are needed. Kevin, sorry, I
was just going to jump in, because I do think that's crucial, because I find many of the times that I've been mentoring someone, it's exactly about sitting there and listening to what it is that their problems are, about their business, fully understanding what they're trying to do, how they're trying to get there, and then actually just asking them, so why are you doing it like that? And so often the answer might be something like, well, that's what the industry does. That's what we've always done. And then you need to challenge that as a mentor and say, well, why? How about doing it a different way? And so exactly as you just said, Gareth, it's about opening up their mind. And I find being a good mentor is precisely, it's about listening and helping them to come to the conclusions. It's helping form their ideas. And it is precisely, nobody's can be good at everything. And I've seen some fantastic businesses, but they might have those core, that core knowledge, but they just don't have some of that other experience. So I would say what makes a good mentor is somebody with experience, so specific experience, but also general experience of working with businesses and helping that to grow. And just having that sort of commercial sense that, well, that's not really going to work because, and maybe we'll come back to this later, so I won't sort of go into it in any detail. But the whole thing about looking at the market size and your projections and your numbers and all of that sort of area, you need to be realistic. And too often, sadly, founders get a bit carried away and they're not realistic enough. So it's about bringing them back and being realistic and challenging some of the things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess there's maybe a fine line between dampening their dreams and grounding them to be more of a realist, so that they're not going to get their hopes up and then, come crashing down. But at the same time, you have to keep some sort of positivity and momentum going, so that they do kind of keep pursuing what they want to do. Because, if it is all doom and gloom, then they might just kind of throw the towel in and give up. So as a mentor, it's finding that fine line and helping them through that pathway.
Absolutely. But if you get the assumptions wrong, then the forecasts will be wrong. And then every pitch deck you're going to put together, any potential funder is going to see that pitch deck with wild numbers in it, and that's the end of the conversation. So as you say, it's about being realistic, but making it, as you say, making it interesting for them, but also making it interesting for a potential funder.
Definitely. Kingma, in terms of obviously like the VC world and funding, you must spend a lot of time helping people in getting their funding as well, and kind of like opening their eyes up to the world of the VC world and kind of the struggles and how to navigate their way through. How have you found that, and kind of what advice do you give to entrepreneurs when they are looking for funding?
So thanks, Anna. That's a question I get asked quite a lot, actually. Kind of the story kind of is quite a personal one, which is that when I was looking for capital for my own company, I found it very, very hard. And, I had to really draw upon any connections I could make with colleagues, with friends, with family, etc., to kind of rustle up the first, the first bit of angel investor interest. And so I'm very kind of empathetic, if that makes sense, to other people doing it the first time. And generally speaking, I'm always very open towards being contacted as well, especially because I really only focus on one kind of particular type of industry when we're looking at investments for PropTech One. And so, but a lot of my relationships, a lot of my friends are working in generalist VCs. I'm also happy to introduce founders who are pitching whatever businesses to, in my opinion, really good investors from the kind of VC scene. But in terms of your question about advice, it's obviously everyone starts at different backgrounds, different kind of playing fields, and I think earlier we had a really good presentation already about how a lot of backgrounds of founders, particularly from ethnic minority backgrounds, particularly from women, are much more disadvantaged than let's say the kind of classic white male stereotype, and so that certainly exists. What I've kind of seen is that I think that the kind of so-called startup ecosystem has genuinely made a lot of progress in the UK. I can only speak on behalf of London because I don't really know other cities outside London too well. But now it's actually very easy to meet, let's say, early employees of startups. It's very easy to meet founders as well. And people are generally very sympathetic, let's say, at the very least, and are very kind of helpful for kind of people who have an idea and are just kind of curious about how they can take it to the next step. So my advice would just be kind of be confident, be very kind of mindful that, of course, someone helping is also, taking up their time as well. So there's always natural limits for how much help they can provide in the grand scheme, and kind of be clear about kind of what advice you're looking for, and the better you can formulate questions, the more specific answers you can get as well. But yeah, attend events. If you see someone nice, basically, don't hesitate to kind of follow that conversation.
Definitely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And obviously, we talk about London. Well, we are based there, so maybe we are biased, but it does seem like a hub as well for startups. I know there obviously are other cities across Europe and the world, but yeah, a lot of startups seem to want to come over to London, especially for funding. So that must be a good sign in itself. Gareth, obviously, it kind of maybe is what it says on the tin. You work for the startup loans. When it comes to funding, I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never raised funds myself. But to me, speaking to hundreds, thousands of startups and kind of being quite involved in the industry, it seems like one of the most daunting aspects of being a startup, being a founder, when it comes to raising money. I myself hate the thought of like having to raise any sort of money and pitching myself, or looking at where that's going to come from. So without being a really obvious question, how do you guys help startups when it comes to looking for money and raising funds, and not just obviously getting the money? Like, talk me through the whole process and everything that you kind of do with them.
Sure. I think that's a really interesting theme, Anna, and it's probably worth calling out that point you said about, you have a fear of any type of sort of funding, because I think there's a real difference between personal debt and business debt. And I think what we try to help business owners understand is that debt for a business can be massively advantageous if it's the right type of debt and it's managed in the right way. So with startup loans, this is a government scheme that helps businesses apply for funding up to 25k, so quite small startup sums to get the business off the ground. We also, tied into that, provide mentoring services, and we divide that through the application journey into pre-loan support, which is the really early stages of getting application ready. So getting ready for the loan decision, making sure your business plan, your cash flow forecast, and your personal sort of finances are all sort of aligning and making sense. And we'll actually provide a business advisor to work one-on-one with the applicant through that process. And then once the loan has been agreed, there's post-loan support as well, which is ongoing support after the loan's been provided. And this takes the form of what I guess would be more conventional mentoring. We provide it in a range of different ways. Some of it's digital, some of it's face-to-face, or at least it was before hybrid working became the new thing. I'm not sure how that's gonna change over time, but we do still have the face-to-face option. And it's as we've talked about, the type of mentoring is tailored to the individual, but equally our mentors have that breadth of experience and that sort of understanding of the business marketplace, so that they can help people navigate those early challenges and be there to celebrate those early joys as well, because that's a key part of it.
Definitely. And I think that's, really important what you've highlighted there. When a lot of the time when I talk about mentors or have spoken about people having a mentor, we don't necessarily think about it specifically for funding, but you said, every kind of step of the way, there is support given to, these startups, these founders, because, it's a lot of the time it's helping them to understand fully what they are going through and what they need to go through, and, the do's and the don'ts and the risks, and, like you said, a business debt is different to a personal debt. It's not as all maybe as daunting as it first seems, especially if you're a first-time raiser. So I guess my next question is, when we think about mentors, I've said it in more of a general way, but like when it comes to funding, it's probably very good to have someone there, even if it's not a specific mentor to you, to kind of help you through the direction of your funding. Why is having a mentor for entrepreneurs so important, whether that be through the whole journey or through the funding journey in itself, like you said specifically? I'll leave this one open, so if anyone wants to join in.
Yeah, I can take a first stab. So I mean, Kevin and Gareth already touched upon mentoring at the start of this conversation. They obviously emphasized the importance of listening and having empathy in general. I think when it comes specifically to mentoring for fundraising, well, a key skill for fundraising in general for any entrepreneur at any stage is really their ability to storytell. And in 99% of the cases, you are pitching essentially to a potential investor who really has no clue about the industry, the actual problem you are trying to solve. And so it's really important essentially to, I think, practice the skill of storytelling. And what that means is specifically practicing a skill of essentially creating empathy to your audience on what it is you're trying to solve, why it should be exciting, why it should get people, make people feel passionate. And I think that's what a really good mentor does. So some mentors come from the industry and are, very senior and very experienced and really know their business inside out. And I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword, really, because of course they have the sector expertise in terms of really understanding the technicalities, the practical obstacles, for example, getting a startup off the ground. But on the other hand, it might be a bit more difficult for them to kind of to listen as a more kind of general audience would be listening. And so I think a really good mentor is able to, or maybe you can find multiple mentors, of course, but a good balance would be to have a mentor who can essentially listen to your pitch with a fresh set of ears and really communicate to you very clearly on which parts could be improved in order to really make it more relatable and more exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I've done it again, Anna. You were about to speak. I was just going to say that storytelling is very crucial because we opened today with Liana talking about business plans and such things. So many years ago, working for banks in the city, big thick business plan. You have a business plan and it has a 2-3 page executive summary. If by the time you've read that 3-page executive summary, it hasn't grabbed your attention, you don't bother to read the rest of the 70 pages. It's that simple. And a pitch deck is exactly that same sort of thing. You've got to grab someone's attention. I likened it, I think, in my book about, think of it as a trailer for a big upcoming blockbuster movie. You've got a very short period of time, hit the highlights, hit the bits that are going to grab someone's attention so that they then want to know more details. So your pitch deck is typically 15, 18 or so pages. It's to somebody that doesn't know what it's about, but you've got to make it exciting. You've got to hit those key points, and then they will then come back to you and say, I want to know more about this. And that's when you can start to go into more detail. And that's not just about what the deck looks like, it's about the way you deliver it. So precisely, if it's a Zoom call, if it's live, you have got to practice that whole storytelling, both in the written form in the deck and in the delivery of it. But looking at the bigger picture, the whole thing is about understanding how to go about getting investment ready. What are the different stages you've got to go through, both from a technical point of view, from a commercial point of view, and understanding getting an advisory board in place, because investors like that, and it helps you as a business to plug the gaps that you and your co-founders might not have. So it's about understanding all those different steps. And then it's about understanding where you're going to raise your finance from, and that depends on a whole range of different things, depending on size and what period you are in your scale up journey. And then if you're going to angels, it's a different story to if you're going to crowdfunding, to if you're going to VCs. So you just need to understand what's the best way of going about all of that, and that's where mentors can come in and help. And coming back to Gareth, debt can be actually very useful, because if it's debt, you're not selling, you're not giving away equity, so you're keeping more of the business. So it's about balancing all of these things, and it's about having to understand how all of those different bits of the jigsaw all fit together.
And I think maybe that's why you have these mentors and these experts that have either worked in it for years or done it themselves, that can guide you along the way, because I wouldn't have had a clue that obviously, debt is not a scary word, and it can actually, be good in some ways. We've obviously covered, what skills you need for a mentor, what makes a good mentor, and how you guys can help, mentors can help in terms of looking for funding and other aspects. So my question now, I guess, is how do you, as an entrepreneur, how do you look for a mentor? What do you look for in a mentor? And if some mentor's not right for you, is it just as simple as finding a mentor and then that being great, let's connect? Or different mentors, I'm sure, will probably work for different entrepreneurs, and some aren't a great match, whereas some others. So yeah, how do startups go out there looking for a mentor? Gareth, I'll pass this one to you first.
Yeah, I think Kingma made a really good point earlier, which was that sometimes it's worth considering multiple mentors, because you won't always get everything you need from one mentor. And I think it's about looking for people that not necessarily are from the same industry as you sometimes, or have a different viewpoint as well. So you're looking for someone who's going to challenge you in a positive way. I think in terms of practically getting in touch with a mentor, there are sort of paid for mentoring services out there. So there's professional mentors. There's networking events. It's a great way to kind of meet people from the industry, and it's about, again, cultivating relationships there to sort of ascertain how you can kind of get the information you need from people you meet in your network. And then there's places like startup loans. There's sort of other government-based support as well, in terms of the sort of startup support helpline and things like that. So there's lots of different places you can access a mentor, but I think the key thing is sort of looking for someone who is going to challenge you, and, like we said before, help you unlock that higher level thinking.
Definitely. And I also think, adding to your point, Kinga, as well, like you said, if you're not the right person in terms of investment, because you kind of focus on the top tech side of things, you will then connect them with someone and I guess that kind of applies the same for mentorship, or if someone's looking for funding but they're maybe suited more to a loan or to another VC, it's like it seems that everyone in the industry kind of wants to help in any way that they can, so that you will be connecting people to the right people if you think that there are certain matches and fits out there.
Yeah, I mean, a key kind of skill to have, I guess, in VC is really in deal flow, and that means in making connections. So that's why, of course, it's very much in my interest, as much as for whoever I'm looking to connect, interest to make good introductions as well. And there's kind of like a tacit, I guess, arrangement or relationship whereby if I make good introductions, then I also hopefully will receive good introductions over time as well, and that helps essentially with my so-called deal flow. So I mean, I know that sounds, rather kind of practical, but at the same time, it makes it sustainable as well. It makes it work, and it also means that, as I said, because I'm more of a specialist VC, I just have fewer conflicts of interest, let's just say, than other investors kind of in this market. But I mean, on the kind of the broader topic of mentorship as well. I think one maybe it's kind of. So, I mean, I always like to kind of introduce VC by saying that it's really not for every founder. There's a very different kind of mentality, I think, for startup founders who are raising VC capital to essentially be prepared to always be fundraising for many, many years of their life and their working profession, and really be driven by this kind of sense of hyperscaling and hypergrowth, which is not really suitable for every business model and every other founder as well. But when it comes to VC founders looking for mentors, I think my advice is always basically just look for someone that you essentially aspire to replicate in terms of their career success as well. I'm not sure how applicable this is to kind of general entrepreneurs, but I think for startup founders especially, that's very true, and that's very true of all the startup founders I've worked with, both in terms of companies that I've invested in, from the VCs I've worked for, as well as the founders I used to work for when I was an employee for startups too.
Yeah, I guess it's a really interesting point. I'd never thought about it before, but I guess maybe there's similarities or connections in between mentors, sorry, mine went blank then, mentors and role models. So like you just said, inspiring them, maybe your mentor can, become like a bit of a role model to you, or maybe you can look out for a role model that then can become a mentor to you, and there can be a connection in that way. Kevin, have you had any experience in this, or do you have any comment on that point?
Oh, sorry, I turned my microphone on and off again. So yes, I'm not a mentor for microphones. Okay, so I think first of all, relationship is important. So whether you get on with each other is important, because if you just jar and you don't communicate well and it doesn't work, then that's just sort of never really going to work. So I think there has to be that communication and that relationship type angle. As to somebody you look up to, I'm not sure. I would say one of the better aspects of being a mentor from the mentee's point of view is hearing about the failures. And the reason that is because when somebody succeeds, you tend to move on, you accept it, you grab it and think, well, didn't I do well? When you fail, all of us tend to analyze that failure a bit more. Why did we fail? What went wrong? And what do we need to do to not fail next time? So you actually learn much more from your failures than your successes, because the successes might just have been good luck. So I think that's one thing, and that's important that a mentor gets that across, to make sure that, to talk about their own failures. I don't know, in today's world, do people look up to somebody that is happy to talk about all their failures, or are we as a society too much looking at the perfect person? So I'm not sure. I would say it is important to have that relationship and to believe that they're being able to tell you something, rather than looking up to them as your, well, as I say, as your ideal businessman, woman, whatever it happens to be. It's that relationship is for me the more important thing.
Yeah, I mean, just as a direct reply to Kevin, I absolutely agree with him, of course. I think that image, or that media image, let's say, of a kind of, I don't know, Mark Zuckerberg was used earlier in one of the slides. So that is a fictional thing, I think. I mean, I think that anyone who is, let's say, kind of has achieved a success in their career, she or he would have faced a lot of setbacks and failures over time as well, and ideally would have learned from them as well and improved upon them to achieve that so-called success too. So yeah, I think it's absolutely wrong to always to kind of think that some people have this kind of straight exponential trajectory, let's say, from birth. I think the reality is lots of riding a roller coaster, and I absolutely agree that that a good mentor would communicate essentially that roller coaster, how they failed, why they failed, how they managed to pick themselves up again, and ultimately, I guess, persevere.
And I think it's also just important to pick up on one other point you've just made, Kimar, and that's success. Success is different for everybody. One person's success might be to run their one coffee shop with one member of staff, and that's all they want to do. Somebody else might want the global domination and take over companies and scale it and grow it and rapid growth, etc., etc. And you need to understand that what everybody is looking for is not the same as everybody else, and you need to help them to achieve what they're looking for, not what you think they're looking for or what you think they should be looking for. Because, as I say, we're all different and we all want different things. And COVID has certainly shown us that people are balancing much more life and business than ever before. So it's a case of is it a lifestyle business, or is it something that you really want to grow with the whole purpose of growing it rapidly for 5 years and then selling it on?
I think that's a massive misconception actually in the industry, that all kind of founders, entrepreneurs and businesses want global domination. Because I was speaking to someone recently that said they were helping someone, mentoring them, helping them, and they were like, oh, and then next year we can look to do this, and next year we can look to opening up another branch and this, and the founder was like, I'm absolutely happy just having my little local business up in Scotland. Like I just want to work with the local community. I don't want to take it regional and then global. And I think that's one thing that we don't always realize is, like you say, success is different for everyone, and some people, they have their goal from the beginning, and once they've hit it, they are more than happy where they are. We've mentioned the dreaded C word, COVID, and that was one of my next questions. But I'm also very conscious that we have had a few questions from the audience, which some of our lovely audience have been answering between themselves, which is fantastic. But one of the questions, which you did touch on earlier as well, Gareth, was is mentoring face-to-face? So you obviously said yes, that does happen, or it did a lot before COVID. Has the pandemic and COVID affected people, trying to get funding, trying to get mentoring, and is it going to change the landscape going forward forever? So will we see a lot more virtual mentoring and kind of like people connecting online than we will go back to the face-to-face world?
Sure. So I'll take the first part of the question. So in terms of what we've seen in terms of the impacts. So I think what we've seen is definitely more demand. So there's greater demand, and I think that's because we're seeing an influx of a greater number of first-time business owners entering the market. So people who, due to circumstances, usually COVID related, have changed career, returned, that they want to return to work and do something slightly different. People who've been impacted by furlough and that kind of thing, and are now trying to, during that time, they've kind of thought about fulfilling or pursuing their business dreams. So we're seeing a lot more new business owners entering the market, and I think that affects the type of support that we provide and the type of support that's required. And I think as Kevin was saying, it's about looking at the business sort of ambitions. We're seeing a lot of, I think you used the phrase as well, Kevin, those lifestylers, those lifestyle businesses. I think we're seeing a greater number of those. So it's about, what level of support is required, and we're really spending a lot of time tailoring the content to be more relevant to these new types of business owners that we're seeing entering the market. Also, we're seeing a lot of and this, I guess, is not COVID related, but I'll mention it as a broader point. But we're seeing a lot more sustainable business ideas, which I think is brilliant. We're seeing so many businesses come through that have got recycling is at the heart of their business, or they're already thinking about their carbon footprint. So again, we're looking at how do we support those sustainable business ideas that really seems to have accelerated. The sort of the other part of the question in terms of the face-to-face versus digital, I think undoubtedly digital is, it's the way forward in terms of being able to reach more people from a practical perspective. I think some people will always want that face-to-face, that comfort, of being, sort of sitting across from someone, having a coffee chat, and just putting the world to rights and just talking through their, their business ideas and plans. So I don't see that going away. But again, I think the whole world is currently getting used to this sort of hybrid model. I think what we've learned is that digital works far better than we ever thought it did in the past. So I think, we're exploring digital more, and it gives us greater reach.
Definitely. And I guess it's good to see all these new areas popping up. You were saying sustainability, the lifestylers. I guess sustainability is a hot topic at the moment with what's coming up this weekend. But every business is going to have to look to be more sustainable, and to see all these like sustainability startups popping up at the moment is, I guess it's really good to see. And I once said to someone, do you fear the space is getting overcrowded? And they were like, there'll never be too many sustainable startups that, businesses that are trying to make a difference, a social impact startup. So yes, it's obviously lovely to see that. Kingma, I'm going to pass this to you now in terms of, has COVID brought any massive changes or massive rippling effects to the VC world? Have you seen anything kind of out of the ordinary that may have been a repercussion of COVID in the pandemic?
I mean, COVID's changed so much, right? But focusing on VC, I mean, firstly, some startups that probably wouldn't have grown that much have grown exponentially. Some famous examples be, of course, Hopin, Zoom, of course, as a public company, but you can just look at their share price to see how much interest that gathered. Tech companies in general have done pretty well out of COVID, I would say. Valuations have definitely increased or accelerated their increase during this time. So it's a good time essentially to start a tech company. It's also a good time to be a tech VC as well, since there's just more money in the market for funding as well, because of this kind of renewed interest into technology and kind of more resilience, let's say, business models. So I think that's kind of one side on just covering like I guess, without actually referencing any specific numbers, just kind of looking at the kind of economics. On the kind of practical side as well, I've actually quite enjoyed working from home and speaking via video call for the reason that maybe this is just myself. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of other people. I in the past, I think for example, when I was meeting my own potential investors for my own.
Oh, have we lost Kingma?
Oh dear. Shall I jump in whilst he's
Yes, please do.
Oh, Kingma, are you back?
Sorry, I'm back. Did I get? Sorry. Long story short, I used to be a bit nervous basically when it came to face-to-face meetings and like going into someone's like really impressive looking offices and going up the lifts. And I think kind of like everyone working at home and doing video calls from their living room or bedrooms or whatever actually just helped kind of reduce my own, I guess, anxiety when it came to speaking to new people. And I think I see that from founders as well. Like I have scheduled really, really back-to-back calls. So in terms of lifestyle, it's actually kind of made me work more intensively. But also at the same time, I'm able actually to meet more people way frequently. And I think that's actually probably a good thing, to be honest, when it comes to learning more about the market, when it comes to, again, making introductions and whatever, exchanging advice.
Definitely. I will pass it to you, Kevin. I was just going to say the exact same thing. When I first became editor, life then went digital, and I think it really helped ease me in because it's a lot easier kind of like presenting yourself online and then working your way up to in person than it is jumping straight in to the in-person presenting gigs. So I couldn't agree with that more. Although I do think there will always be a need for in-person, because then you're not having to worry if people's internet connections are going to go down or if people can't see the slides, first world problems. But yeah, Kevin, please give us your input.
Yeah, my observations on COVID, a number of fold. So Gareth talked about a number of issues, but I think every business, their business model changed. Their business model had to adapt or pivot and change very quickly in order to continue with business when COVID struck, lockdowns, and all of the different things that brought about. And what we found is many businesses actually were more successful. They pivoted in such a way that they were actually more successful than perhaps they would ever have been if they hadn't have done so. But whatever they did to survive, they actually are now looking at the world, hopefully beginning to come back to normal again. And they're not, I don't think any of them are ever going to go back to exactly how they were before. So the new business model will be a combination of what they were doing before, what they had to do during COVID, and combining the best of the two. And that's what's going to take them forward. And I think that's true for mentoring. I think that's true for seminars or webinars, in that what we're doing here, as we've already said, we're able to talk to people now from around the world. If we were doing this live in London or wherever, you'd have people that would have spent an hour getting here and then having the event and then an hour getting home. And that by definition limits the amount of people that can attend. But by having that combination of doing some events live, face-to-face, and some events on the internet, I think you're managing to get the benefit of both worlds. So that's just the same as sort of the best of both. And then lastly, my comments on raising finance during and post-COVID. During COVID, what was interesting is at the very end of last year, so 2020, Seedrs platform, so one of the larger crowdfunding platform for people that aren't aware of them, their statistics showed that during 2020, more money was invested by more people than any previous year. And that was probably because people were sitting around on the internet looking and investing. But nevertheless, it was just as easy to raise finance from that crowdfunding experience. However, the big difference was there were less businesses on that platform. And that was because it was only certain businesses, i.e. those that were still doing well during COVID, that were able to do so. So it was easier for them to raise because there was less competition for more amount of money. So as Kingmar mentioned earlier, lots of businesses have done very well out of COVID. Others have done not so well. So it depends where you are and what you're doing. But it is all about adapting and staying ahead of the curve and trying to understand where that's going next. And that's always true in business, but COVID just made it even more so. So I think going forward, it's just always a case of adapting to change circumstances and making the most of it.
Definitely. Well, panel, I could sit here and talk to you all afternoon. The last 40 minutes have flown by. I'm not sure if I have for anyone else, but I've really enjoyed it. There's just a few questions that I want to ask before I literally say goodbye. Someone asked Gareth, is there a penalty for paying back early? I'm guessing that's referring to obviously startup loans.
No, there isn't. And in fact, we give a couple of different options. So you can, if you wanted to, you could split the loan into tranches. And we find that for someone who's a little bit nervous about borrowing, that can be a great way of sort of helping them through that, because they can draw down the first part of the loan, and then depending how that goes and whether they need the remainder of the funding, they can then access the next part of the loan. So it's quite flexible, and it's designed to be that way for new kind of entrepreneurs really and entering the finance market.
Perfect. And someone also said, please, who to contact in startup loans. You need a mentor, and in brackets, and holidays, but the mentor.
I did spot that and chuckle. Yeah. So if you visit the startuploans.co.uk website, all of the contact information for us is on there. So you can contact us through web chat, telephone, and email as well to get started.
Perfect. There was a few other questions, but guys, if they are like your dying desire, please contact us afterwards and we can connect you with any of our panelists or Liana, and we can try and help answer your further questions. But I do think the panel did a great job in answering everything in such detail today. So I'm coming away feeling very educated. So I guess it's just now, thank you to the panel, thank you to our keynote Liana, and all our amazing panelists individually, Kevin, Gareth and Kingma. A massive thank you to obviously the British Business Bank for partnering with us on this event, and to all of you for coming and joining us. I hope you've been able to take something away from today. As I say, I definitely have, and it can help your business in some way. If you go to the handouts, I'm pointing the wrong way again. If you go to the handouts tab, there will be a link with more information on there, and we can connect you with the right people. And as I say, drop us a message if you want to be connected personally to anyone here. But I guess for now, it's just thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone else. Bye bye.
Thank you all. Bye.